Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, SPC 205, whatever time you're consuming this little artifact of academic media. I am once again Vic McInnes, your SPC 205 instructor, coming to you live on tape from my COVID 19 compound here in the greater Grovetown metro area, the Agantech Outpost here in Columbia County, Georgia. Hey, our lecture today is brought to you by vegetables. You know, they may say they're corn chips, but Cool Ranch Doritos still not a vegetable. Okay, I want to start out telling you something. I want y'all to listen to me. If you think exercise is a 60-minute commitment 3 times a week at the gym, you're missing the point completely. If you think that going on a diet is something to do with nutrition, you don't see the forest through the trees. It's a lifestyle. I know it sounds cliche, but you have to find things you love to do. Now, if I was talking to you guys about nutrition, if I was talking to you guys about fitness, you would hear that and you'd look at the monitor and you'd go, what the hell is he talking about? We've seen that guy. Clearly, nutrition, fitness, not his number one priority. And I wouldn't be insulted if you said that. The fact of the matter is that if I told you that and it was anything other than from my new book, The Dad Bod Diet, you guys would just laugh at me because I am clearly not an expert on fitness or nutrition. If I sourced that quote the way it really should have been, and I said, you know, Brett Hubel is a celebrity trainer. He's one of the trainers on The Biggest Loser, the hit NBC TV show. And he said that if you think of exercise as a 60-minute commitment 3 times a week at the gym, you're missing the point completely. Okay. I am clearly no expert on fitness or nutrition. Okay. I do think Cool Ranch Doritos should be taken as a vegetable. Okay. But if I borrow Brett Hubel's credibility and I cite him as a source, I can now borrow some of his credibility to make a point in a speech I'm making. Okay? And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about the use of evidence. How we borrow and use information that some expert put together, okay, to give us credibility. So what we're talking about today is the use of evidence. The who, the what, the where, the when, the how, and the why. Okay? So the first thing we want to talk about is when we use evidence. And there's 3 very specific times. One of them you're going to want to use immediately. 2 of them are a little bit further down the road. We use evidence when the speaker needs to improve their credibility. You know, go back to Aristotle, ethos, pathos, and logos. Aristotle said that ethos, or the perceived ethical credibility of the speaker, is the single most important thing in public speaking. If you don't have anything more to your credentials in that introduction, if you don't have anything more than, hey, I've been researching this, your credibility may not be as high as it should be. But if you're talking to people about pro sports and you can quote people like Tom Brady, if you can quote people like, Muhammad Ali, if you can quote elite premier athletes, okay, LeBron James, if you can quote those people, you can borrow their credibility, okay? The second time we're going to use it is when we're being persuasive. If your attitudes that you're seeking to achieve, the ideas that you're putting out there, if they are associated with the people that we hold in high esteem, okay, then we will achieve an attitude change that will last longer, okay? That's why when you have, some scientist, somebody with a PhD in microbiology and marine biology, goes before Congress to testify about biodiversity in the oceans, they take Channing Tatum with them. Channing Tatum, not in any way an expert on something like that, but he is somebody we hold in high esteem because he seems to be a nice guy and he's a good entertainer. You know, you see the same thing with Anna Kendrick going up and sitting and testifying for and advocating for whatever cause they're advocating. I mean, that's how celebrities, get themselves, make sure they stay relevant, is by advocating for these things because we love our celebrities. Same thing for sports figures, not so much for politicians. But that's the way we achieve attitude change over a longer period of time. Then we also have an opportunity, and we're going to talk about this in detail later, future counter persuasion. If somebody's going to come in next week and argue the point opposite yours, and you just really use a whole lot of different sources, and they don't use any, you're going to win the day. Okay? So let's talk about why we use evidence. First of all, we use it for clarity. We have a tendency to say, when we're speaking extemporaneously, we have a tendency to use Things like a bunch, we don't necessarily have precise language. We talked about that last time with methods of presentation. A quote from someone can give you good clarity, can make things crystal clear. Like if you're talking about the horrors of World War One, get a quote from a World War One veteran that was there. That will give it clarity. It also gives you accuracy. We have a tendency to say a bunch, a lot, several. But if you're, and we're going to talk about statistics in a minute, but if you quote a statistic that says 67.2% instead of a lot or even most, it gives you accuracy, and accuracy gives you credibility. Okay, we use evidence, like I said earlier, to build our own credibility. We also use it to assume authority. If you want to quote Roger Goodell about how to run a professional sports league, okay, Roger Goodell may not be a good example. The NFL not necessarily way up there in esteem this week. David Stein, who ran the NBA for 20 years, commissioner of the NBA for 20 years. If you want to quote and have authority on how we need to move professional sports forward, and you've got someone with great authority and credibility like David Stein, quoting David Stein and showing that David Stein would have been in agreement with you gives you authority. And then finally, it gives you currency. And by this, I'm not talking about like cha-ching, cha-ching, bring me some dollars. I'm talking about currency like you're up to date, okay? No matter how good you are at whatever it is you're doing, and no matter what kind of an expert it is, there's somebody else out there in the world that's also doing research on what you're doing. So by maintaining that currency, you make sure that you are up to date and giving the most accurate evidence available. So what's the next thing we need to do? We need to know the what. What kinds of evidence can we use? The first kind of evidence we're going to use is opinions of others. Now, a lot of people shy away from saying something about the opinions of others. They don't think we should use that. They think we should stick to facts. But I mean, first of all, if you want to quote an expert, you're probably going to get their opinion, okay? But the first kind of opinion we're going to talk about is public opinion. And we see those, I mean, dear Lord, we're coming into a election. We see public opinion polls every single day of the week. A couple of things about public opinion polls, and that's why I'm doing this, because now I can look at you guys straight in the eye. A couple of things about public opinion polls. First of all, number one, a public opinion poll is not a fact by any way, shape, or form. Even when somebody comes out and says, the one today said, in a national election, Donald Trump is trailing Joe Biden by 16%. Okay. They don't know that. That is not a fact. That's not even a fact. That is just what the only fact they have is when you read the small print. There are 160 million registered voters in the United States right now. If they put a lot of effort into it, a public opinion survey firm is going to call between 1,000 and 1,500 people to get the sense of the entire nation. Okay. That's not even 0.001% of the registered voters in the United States. Okay, public opinion polls can be used. Okay, and they're used a lot, and they can be effective. But remember two things. Number one, public opinion polls are nothing more than an opinion that people have used to extrapolate a larger group. So be careful of using public opinion polls. Also, go back and look at your source and make sure that the public opinion poll you're citing isn't being run by somebody who's being paid. There was a couple of years ago, there was a public opinion poll that went out and where people said, and this was not that long ago, this was only like 6-7 years ago, where it said, the people are not that upset about smoking. Only 62% of people think that tobacco companies should be forced to pay for damages to smokers. Well, it turns out that survey was done by a research firm that was a cover for the Philip Morris company, which is the largest tobacco producer in the world. So yeah, a tobacco producing company is going to come up with a survey that says people don't care about tobacco and they think it's okay. So please be aware of that. The second type of opinion is an expert opinion, and that's the one you should really heavily rely on. That's where you find someone who is an expert in the subject. They've studied, they've worked, they know the field very well, and then they make their opinions. Okay? And we see that all the time, and that's real simple. The third type of opinion is what's called lay testimony. Okay, let me tell you what lay testimony is. You guys that go to church may have heard of a lay minister. That's someone who doesn't have any formal training in the ministry that gets to preach. Okay, lay testimony is the same thing. Not an expert, but I have something I need to say, and we're gonna say it. Okay. People all the time will tell you that lay testimony is not worthless. That's not true. Okay. Here's why. If you got rid of lay testimony, your local nightly newscast would last about 3.5 minutes. Because if you watch the local news, a lot of their stories are, hi, we're here at the gas pump with Miss Smith. Miss Smith, tell us what kind of an impact gas going up 20 cents a gallon is going to have on your family's budget. Miss Smith is not an expert on economics. She's not an expert on energy supplies. She's not an expert on anything, but she knows that if she has to pay an extra $50 a week for gas, that's going to be a problem for her. Okay? And the other one that here in the South we've all heard, hey, I'm here with Bubba Newbern. Bubba, tell us what the tornado sounded like. Okay? That is a lay opinion. Okay? And they're perfectly usable in a speech, but just be aware that they are the opinion of someone who is not considered an expert. Okay? We can use statistics. Now, a statistic is defined as a large quantity of data that's been analyzed in order to make inferences. A statistic is also not a fact. Okay? A statistic is defined as the practice or sciences of collecting and analyzing numerical data in large quantities, especially for the purpose of inferring proportions in a whole. It's just they've taken a lot of data and they've analyzed it. Okay? So be careful of that. Use statistical measures correctly. Okay? If I was to ask you, and I always ask this, I have, okay, if you know the difference between mean, median, and average, please raise your hand. And I will always get 5 or 6 people that will raise their hands. And I say, okay, all you people know, you're confident 100% that you know the difference between mean, median, and average. And they'll go, yes. And I'll point to one of them and I say, what's the definition of median? And that person will give a definition, and every single time somebody in that room will go, that's not what that is. And then they will start arguing, and then it turns out maybe one of the 5 people actually knew what a median was. Okay? A lot of people say average, mean, medium, and they use them interchangeably. Okay? Know what your statistics represent. All right? Because there is, and I have seen this happen before in speeches where someone is just going on, prattling on about what their topic is, and they're giving all these statistics, and then somebody in the back raises their hand and says, you know, you keep saying mean, but I think you mean average. And the speaker just goes, okay, average, what's the difference? And then the guy in the back takes over the speech and starts explaining the difference. Okay? So please be aware of that. Cite the source of your statistics. You did not come up with 22.5% of the population on your own. If you use a statistic, you need to cite the source. Okay? Because it is going to stick out like a sore thumb if you don't. And people will hone in on it. And if you're in an adversarial environment where you're trying to persuade, people will say, hey, listen, where'd you get that 40% from? Because I don't believe you. What do you mean? Where'd you get it from? And if you can't answer that question, your whole credibility is destroyed. Okay? And you need to cite the source of it in the speech. Okay? Round off statistics wherever you can. 32.44382. Just say 32%. Okay? Just round it. Now, 72.5% is 73%. Okay? We may even credibly say it's 75% or almost 75%. But you cannot say, and I have seen this happen more than once, you cannot say nearly 80. All right, I have seen people where they did not go back to the original source and they said 72.5%. They saw something that rounded that up to 75%, which is fine. And then they rounded up again to 80. Well, there's a big difference between 72.5 and 80. And they got called on it. Hey, when you say 80%, are you talking about the doppelganger study of 1987? Why, yes, I am. Well, I've got that document right here in my hands, and it says 72.5. That's not 80% now, is it? Okay? So please be aware of that. And when possible, convert statistics into concrete data. Okay? You know, one of the ones that I'm hearing over and over and over again about how many tons of plastic there are in the ocean. Okay. let me say this. I think plastic in the oceans is horrible. But if somebody says, hey, there's 438 metric tons, kilotons of plastic in the oceans right now, okay, that's fine. Okay. But if somebody looks at me and says, there's enough plastic in the ocean to cover the state of Texas in 3 feet of garbage, okay, then okay, that's understandable. Okay. When they were talking about the $1 trillion package, I'm like going, hey, $1 trillion, hey, that's a lot of money. But when they say, yeah, that means everybody owes that's $10,000 per person in the United States. Okay, that makes it concrete. Okay. Then finally, the last thing we have is factual data, simple statements of things that can be verified. But the onus is on you to verify them, because if you don't, somebody will challenge you on it. You need to go out there and verify it. Okay? So we have opinions of others, statistics, and factual data are the kinds of evidence that you can have. Now, let's talk about the where. So you can use personal knowledge. In fact, use personal knowledge if you're qualified. Cite, I did this experiment. I interviewed this person. I talked to this. I have done this myself. That is a great source. There's nothing that says you can't do that. But you need to be able to cite the research you've done and in detail. Okay? So you can get it from personal knowledge. You can do primary research. Now, primary research includes field work that you've done, okay? If you were going to go in and say, hey, listen, I did a survey of all the trees on the campus of Aiken Technical College, and I found out that there's 2,148 pine trees currently alive on the Aiken Tech campus. I did that by surveying the campus and counting all the trees from the 7th to the 24th of May, 2019. That's field work. That's a good primary source. You can also use surveys where, again, it's almost like a public opinion thing, but except surveys are a little bit different, because you're expressing, when you do a survey, you express the survey population in very much detail. You can do interviews, and there's some stuff in the book about how to do an interview. I always give big credit points. When somebody looks and says, and they're talking about law enforcement, and he says, I interviewed Sheriff Luger T. Axhandle, the sheriff of Aiken County, and this is what he said about law enforcement challenges in Aiken County. Okay? That is huge. That means you put forth the effort to talk to somebody. And always, 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 when I hear that somebody actually did an interview with hey, listen, don't put it past me not to call somebody, make sure you actually did the interview. So don't BS me. I've had that happen before, and I can tell when it's happening. But an interview is great. You can do original documentation examination. Now, here's the example I give for that. If you wanted to do research on George Washington, okay, or no, Queen Victoria. Let's say Queen Victoria, because I've actually done some of this. And you've got two choices. Queen Victoria wrote tens of thousands of pages of journals. She wrote things down in her diary, in her journal, every single night, okay? You can do one of two things. You can go back and read her journals yourself, okay? And the British Archives all has them. They've all been digitized, if you're interested, okay? They're all there, and you can read those. That is primary research. Going back and quoting Queen Victoria because you've seen where she wrote it down. Secondary research, and we're going to talk more in detail about secondary research in just a second. Secondary research would if you went back and read a biography of Queen Victoria, where people excerpted or made assumptions or made analysis of that. Okay, so original document examination, and then you can do experiments. Hey, I can tell you that I know that water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius. But if I go and freeze water and keep checking the temperature, I've done an experiment. I now have primary knowledge. Okay, and like we said a second ago, your other source is going to be secondary research, and that's any information on your topic discovered by other people. And this would include encyclopedias, books, articles, newspapers, statistical sources like the U.S. Census Bureau, websites, or any sort of government documentation. Okay, so the three places you're going to find the evidence you want to use is your own personal knowledge, Primary research, which is research that you've done personally, including fieldwork, surveys, interviews, original document examination, and experiments. And secondary research, which is information on your topic discovered by other people, which is going to include encyclopedias, books, articles, newspapers, statistical sources, websites, and government documents. All right, so let's talk about how to cite evidence. Be specific, okay? When you cite, be as precise as possible, not only in making sure you quote the source correctly, but everything needs to be very specific. If you're giving something, according to Bob Howe, who was, a professor, he says that he thinks this is a big deal. Okay, that is in no way specific. According to Dr. Robert Howe, who has been teaching in the Africa Studies Department at Georgetown University since 1978, the current economic changes going on in sub-Saharan Africa will have a significant impact on 80% of the population by raising their standard of living by 60%. That's all very specific, okay? So be specific. Also, and again, like when we were talking about statistics, don't say most families if you can say 62%. Don't say a lot if you can say 48%. Knowing those statistics and citing the source will give you credibility, okay? Always give the qualifications of the source. I just discussed that. A lot of times people will get up there and say, well, according to the SEC, do you mean the Security and Exchanges Committee or a commission, or do you mean the Southeastern Conference? Okay? And that's if you're quoting an organization. According to Bob Smith, well, nobody knows who Bob Smith is. So according to Dr. Bob Smith, who teaches in the history department at Clemson University, okay, give the qualifications of the source. This is something a lot of people miss. Use unfamiliar evidence. Okay, tell you a little bit. So we've all heard, well, I'll put it back on. I hate looking fuzzy. Okay. We've all heard since we were born, for you guys, it sort of came in. I remember when they really started pushing it in schools, that you shouldn't smoke. Don't smoke, it'll kill you. Don't smoke, This is what healthy lungs look like. This is what lungs of a smoker look like. Well, first of all, it's pretty gross you're showing me a human lung to begin with. And that charcoal briquette you've got on the other hand, really, I've seen it before, okay? And then eventually they come out with all these things, and they've been coming out with a lot of commercials over the last couple of years to just horrify you about smoking. Here's the thing about scary movies and horrifying things. Eventually, we attenuate to them and they don't make any impact anymore, okay? Yeah, they started out with a guy who had to hold the voice box to his throat, and then they started showing people who had, like their jaws removed. And then, and very graphic, very disturbing, very effective. I don't smoke anymore. But eventually we just get to where we just don't see that anymore. So I was driving from Enterprise, Alabama, where my mother lived at the time, down to Tampa, where I was working. And the quickest and easiest way to get there is down Highway 19. It goes through the Pine Barrens on the west coast of Florida. There is nothing for hours upon hours down through there, and you're just driving along. It's 65, 70, speed limit 70. Let's face it, I was going 79. And you see this billboard up in the distance. It's got a boat. It's got some print, some boat. It's some really weird looking advertisement. And I'm cruising along, and I come up to it, and it said, if you smoke 2 packs a day in a year, you would have spent enough money to buy a bass boat. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, what? And I'm like sitting there going, what? And so about 15 minutes later, there's another one comes up. It's got 4 big, all-weather tires. If you smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day, in 6 months, you could buy a new set of tires for your truck. And I'm like, wait, hold on a minute. And now I'm beginning to look for them. Now I'm beginning to go, hold on, wait. Yeah, and then, the next one. It's like, and I forget what it was, and it was all sorts of, and then when you got into more built-up areas, if you smoke 2 packs a day in 4 months, you could buy a new 55-inch HD TV. So this was presenting facts about smoking in a new and different way, and it really caught your attention, okay? So use unfamiliar evidence. Bring out stuff we've never heard before, okay? And always, always, always introduce the evidence. Always introduce the evidence. Always introduce the evidence. Quickest way to introduce the evidence is a simple phrase. According to, okay? According to Bob Smith, who teaches at Georgetown University. Okay? So for this speech coming up, your informative speech, and for every speech after this, you're going to need 3 sources. You're going to need 3 pieces of evidence. I expect to hear you say 3 times, according to, or that's from, to indicate that you just quoted a piece of evidence. If you do not introduce the piece of evidence, you do not get credit for the piece of evidence. Okay? So let's go over the informative speaking rubric. Okay? This is it right here. This is what you're going to be graded on. I believe you'll be able to see my mouse, date, name, topic, all that. We've already been over outlines. Okay? When you turn in your outline and you paste that outline into your discussion board posting, you're going to have the link to your speech, and then right below that, your outline. I'm going to expect to see Roman numeral 1, introduction, A, attention device, B, a statement of purpose, C, statement of qualifications, D, preview of main points, Roman numeral 2, whatever your first main point is. Then I'm going to want to see 2 or 3 subpoints, however many subpoints you need. Then I'm going to see on that outline, number 3, Roman numeral 3, whatever your second main point is, and then the subpoints under that. And then however many main points you need, then the last Roman numeral is going to be conclusion, okay? And then after conclusion, it will say restatement of purpose, review of main points, closing statement. It's that simple. You do that, you get 20 points. And you know, you go back and look at the lecture from the last time where we talked about outlining. Go back and look at that outline that I posted, okay? Just make it look like that, and you'll get 20 points. Okay, I've already done this. So I am going to tell you how to get 75 out of 75 for this speech. If you listen to me and do what I tell you right now, you will get a 75 out of 75. Ready? Okay. First thing, and what I do is, again, I tell you, I put a check next to something you get credit for. You set up your camera, you turn it on, you walk back, you step, you plant your feet, you pause for a second, and then you give me a startling fact, you give me an interesting quote, you say something in a weird and different way, you tell a joke. You don't ask a question. We do not use questions for attention devices in this class. But if you give me a good attention device, you get a check. Okay? You get credit for the attention device. If you get up there and say, hey, good morning, how y'all doing? Okay, my name is Bob. Okay, that's not an attention device. You get up there, you set your camera, you plant your feet, and then you give us your joke, interesting story, good quote, stunning statistic delivered well, okay? You get a check next to attention device. You finish your attention device, you give us your statement of purpose. Right there, statement of purpose. Okay? Today I will be talking to you about. That's simple. Today I will be talking to you about, and then finish that sentence. You do that? Check mark. Statement of purpose. Okay, it says preview of main points next, but I'm going to tell you, do your speaker credentials next. Hi, my name is Bob, and I've been researching this topic. Don't say I've been researching this topic for a couple of days or in the last week. I've been researching this topic. And today I'm going to have 3 main points, and then you give us your preview of your main points. Okay? You just got 10 points out of 75. It is that simple. Okay? The body of the speech, 20 points, effective organization of your main points. You should already have that with the comments, the feedback I give you on your outline that is due Friday by noon. Okay? Effective organization of your main points, and if you stick to that organization and just don't go wandering everywhere, if you stick to that organization and talk to that organization, you'll get a check. Okay? If you stop at the end, if you pause at the end of your introduction and say, my first main point will be, you finish the first main point, You look at the camera and pause for a second and go, my second main point is. You finish your second main point, you pause and look at the camera for a second and say, my last main point will be. You pause, look at the camera at the end of that third main point and go, so wrapping up, boom, 20 points. That's simple. That's simple. Okay? You get to conclusion. I've left off this is the old version, but it's you go, so in wrapping up, today, I've talked to you about, and then repeat your statement of purpose. Check. I talked to you about 3 main points. Check. So today, you know more about whatever it was you talked about. Take my fish population in Clark Hill Reservoir. So in wrapping up, today I've talked to you about the fish population in Clark Hill Reservoir. I've talked to you, first of all, about the Fish Population Survey of 1986. Second of all, I talked to you about the Fish Population Survey of 2017. And then I've talked to you about 3 reasons why the fish population dropped during that 31-year period of time. So now you can be more aware of the fragility of the fish population in Clark Hill Reservoir. Boom, boom, boom. That's 3 things. That is a review of your statement of purpose, a review of your main points, and a closing thought. Boom, 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 10 points. That's simple. Okay? Use of evidence. If I hear you say, according to, and then give me a source and some sort of fact, you get a check. If I hear you say, that was from, and you give me a source, you get a check. You get 3 checks, you get 10 points. Okay? Nonverbal delivery, 15 points. Plant your feet, flex your legs a little bit, keep your head up straight, keep your eyes focused on the audience, and if you want to do a little extra, act like there's an audience. Look around the room a little bit, okay? Keep your hands not like this, but keep them separate. Don't grab onto your card with both hands, okay? Keep moving, gesture, okay? Eye contact, posture, gestures. You do that, 15 points, okay? And then the next 10 points should be the single easiest 10 points in the history of academia. If you go in and you look at your tape and you find that it's 6 minutes and 7 seconds, do it again. Don't submit that one. If you submit one that's 3 minutes and 58 seconds or 6 minutes and 2 seconds, you will get a 0 out of 10 points on that. Trying to make this as simple as possible. Trying to make this as easy to understand as possible. Okay? This is a mechanics course. This is no different than making you go through a checklist before you start welding. This is no different than pilots going through a checklist before they fly an airplane. Okay? This is a checklist. If you look at this rubric, trying to figure out how to gesture with half of my screen covered up. When you look at this rubric right here, okay, that is your checklist and your outline and framework for how to get a 75 out of 75 on this thing. I am not looking for Martin Luther King. I am not looking for John Kennedy. I am not looking for Ronald Reagan. I am not looking for Barack Obama. That is not how you get an A in my class. You get an A in my class by following the mechanical checklist. I've told this to one student in this class already, and I usually wind up telling 1 or 2 students every year. The Air Force loses more people from pilot training that come in with a pilot's license already than they do just people that came straight out of college. Because when people learn how to fly on their own, they pick up bad habits that the Air Force doesn't want them to have. So they have to, in a lot of cases, go back through and teach them those new habits. Okay? This is exactly what's going on here. Everybody has bad habits. I do. If we were in a classroom environment, people get, in my classes, get so frustrated that they say, you repetitively say okay all the time. And I'm like going, okay, I know that. Okay. I said, but I'm not giving a public speech. And then when they see me give a public speech, as you've seen already through watching that demonstration informative speech, you don't hear me say all of that. Because when I'm doing a public speech, I change my behaviors and I go through the mechanics of giving an effective public speech. That is what we're trying to teach you here. Okay? So there's the rubric. It's posted by the time you get this lecture. I will have it posted on in the documents folder. Okay. Look at that rubric and then practice and tape yourself. All right. You got to, if we were in a classroom environment and you don't tape yourself, it's wasting your grade. But I can almost understand it. You've got to tape yourself anyway. When you tape yourself, go back through and say, nope, didn't start with an attention device, started with good morning. Got to go back and redo it because I want that full 10 points. Combine my statement of purpose and my preview of main points. Got to go back and fix that. Okay? And you make notes to yourself, and then you go back and you do it again and you work on it. And you do it 3 or 4 times, and you know what? You get a 75. It's that simple. And again, it's all written right there. This is not magic. This is not voodoo. This is straight up. I can't make it any easier than this, and I want you guys to understand that. I want to give everybody in the class an A. Okay? All right, cool. That is what I have for you today. Remember, Friday by noon, I need to see those outlines, and then and again, I'll send out an announcement about the outlines just to remind you, just so everybody understands. Okay? All right. That's all I've got for you now. Stay safe, stay well, and we will see you soon.